Stand clear.
100% Wild Podcast.
So for all you listeners,
Hello, and welcome to
definitely not your favorite outdoor podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild Podcast, powered by DeerCast. This is episode number 310. Thank you, everybody. That's
The
very
studio
kind of you.
audience
Wow.
is really, really happy to see us.
They're actually hunched over their computers right now.
All right, you're Tim Chelswick.
You are always Matt Drury.
Unfortunately, I can't get rid of it. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse.
So you were blessed, though, because you had a successful controlled burn on your ground.
Yeah, and boy, just like anything in life, you find out how many experts there are when you post on social media. You're not supposed to call it a controlled burn because you can't control fire.
I've been saying
I thought
that
that's
all
what
wrong
we
the whole
did,
time.
but yeah, prescribed burn.
Jeez.
I was told by many, many experts where I was incorrect. But yes, we went and I don't know how many episodes, maybe an episode or two ago, we had Logan Burke on, and we talked about
2 episodes ago.
Okay, we talked about prescribed burns, and he that's what he does, and so we had him come into the new farm that I purchased and help us out, and we just kind of got lucky. It was a last minute deal. We knew we were going to do it, but we didn't know we were going to do it that day, and the weather conditions were perfect. We had the right wind we wanted. He wanted to do a back burn, and so Scott, myself, and Logan, and then one of the neighboring farmers helped us out quite a bit,
Nice.
and Aaron Bennett came up and helped us a little bit. So we had enough people, and we had all the right equipment and stuff, and it was really cool. That was my first time getting to be a part of one, so it was very, very neat to be a part of.
Sure.
And man, it's watching somebody that really knows what they're doing and how it all works to make sure it is controlled. I guess you can't say that, but it was very interesting. He really knows his stuff.
Yeah, and you really have to, because the stakes are pretty high, especially when you got neighbors that would prefer their ground not burned out.
So there was one point, like on our north line, the neighbor has just like an overgrown, I don't know if it's CRP or what, but I mean, it looks like it's just ready to go at any minute. So it's on my north line, so we purposely had a northerly wind, a northwest wind, and we backburned and all that stuff. And so anyways, there was a point where we finally got, we burned all of our lines in, our fire breaks, and we got to the point where we needed to start burning that northern end. And I was on the tracker with the water tank kind of going on the line, the fire break line, and making sure that it didn't cross into the neighbors. And there's a couple cedars on the fence line. It was just the fence line's real grown up and needs a lot of attention. And so anyways, I'm driving up and down, spraying this as I'm driving, and that was my role.
I got the help too.
Yeah, exactly. So I got to a point where I was on one end of the line, and I could see on the other end, there was a little bit of fire starting back up in the fire break. So I'm flying back over there, and there's a big cedar on the fence that's the fire's only a foot away from this, and I'm shitting my pants basically. Am I the reason this is gonna go south? But it all turned out fine, and it was neat. It was really cool to see.
I'm glad. The footage is pretty crazy. You posted a reel, so if people aren't following you, Matt Drury 81 on Instagram.
It went viral for me, but Scott shared it to the Drury page, so it went to 167,000 people have seen it. So yeah.
Well, hey, if you're that one YouTuber out there that we lost after 3 minutes of last week's show,
I saw that comment.
Sorry about that. Before we get to our guest, we were going to be talking about clover plots and some land management stuff with an absolute guru.
The gamekeeper.
The gamekeeper.
The godfather of gamekeeping. That's his new name, I think.
I like it. I want to let people know that we've got an up-close and personal wildlife encounter in this week's Real Wild Clip, which is one of the hardest phrases that I ever have to say.
I don't know if it's been up or not, but has the social team already shared it to social media?
I don't think they got this one.
Okay.
I think we took this one
all the
out of
Real Wild
DeerCast.
clips I keep seeing on social media hit there before it hits here.
Yeah,
It's not the purpose.
We're pulling these directly out of DeerCast. And then we're helping our buddy James out with this week's question of the day about avian flu. And then we have a wildlife word that's all about nest dynamics for turkeys.
All right.
So
Without
before
further
all
ado.
that, we're gonna hop in and say hey to our buddy Bobby Cole, the gamekeeper,
From BioLogic, Mossy Oak BioLogic.
host of the Gamekeeper podcast.
That's right.
Less of a host, more of a ringleader. That is a crew of guys to keep wrangled. How do you do it, Bobby?
It's hard. It's like herding cats, as you can imagine. Tim, you and I, we're kindred spirits.
A little bit. Only I'm herding cat over here.
Hey,
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I can only imagine Bobby's trying to corral Lanny, and I know that's got to be probably difficult.
It is. We'll have start times. We'll say, okay, we're going to start at 1:30, and most of the time it's like 2:30 before we actually.
Yeah.
But it works. Your guys' show is a fun one to watch. I think like any good show, you forget that you are a viewer and you just feel like you're sitting there on a couch as part of the conversation. So if you're not already listening to the Gamekeepers podcast, it's definitely worth a subscribe. You'll feel like you're part of the gang.
Well, these guys are actually diving into the how-tos and if you don't have to own a piece of property to want to be a gamekeeper, even if you're leasing a piece or you have permission on something, or these guys really break down what you need to be doing on the property, how to make it better for your wildlife, how to help your turkey population, and everything in between. So it is, we were talking about doing a prescribed burn. That's the kind of stuff that these guys live and breathe and can dive into real great detail, and they get great guests. So definitely would check it out. One of my favorites.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much.
So, Bobby, what's top of mind for you at this time of year as a gamekeeper?
Guys, so the controlled burn stuff is what the prescribed
There you
fire.
go.
Oh, geez,
Bobby.
I don't want to get your people fired up there, but that's probably the
No
hottest
pun
thing
intended.
going.
Whoa, wow. Nice job.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean that's really what a lot of people are trying to do. We see more people are getting into wanting to burn their property than ever before. Or I mean, it used to be a thing in the past. It was extremely popular, and then for liability reasons, it seems like people have kind of tried to shy away from it or they're nervous about it. But now people are beginning to understand. The whole, every state forestry commission has made it just where guys can go and have a couple of days school, and they feel they're very knowledgeable about fire and backfires and wind and relative humidity, and can make decisions and burn smartly now. So hats off to the state forestry commissions for doing that, and people recognizing how it helps to roll back and create the habitat that's needed for turkey nests and to produce the forbs, and that wild deer can benefit from. It's a very positive thing.
I saw maybe yesterday or the day before that Neil and Daniel and all those guys were burning, just did a prescribed burn as well, and he kept hashtagging. I think it was Daniel kept hashtagging. Fire for feathers, meaning it helps out the turkey population. Can you go into a little bit more detail why fire and burning your timber and all that, what it does to help the turkeys out exactly?
Yeah, so we're trying to create nesting and brooding habitat. So so much of our world down here, Matt, and without you spending some time in Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia, Louisiana, parts of Arkansas, you might not realize it, but we have a lot of pine plantations and a lot of pine trees. And left unchecked, these things just becomes a thick, impenetrable jungle underneath them. And so where it may be great bedding habitat for whitetails, it ends up becoming a place that it has no value for wild turkeys. But you can flip the script on it and run a fire through it for a few years, and all of a sudden these real valuable forbs come back. And you hear these experts use the word early successional habitat, and it's a plant community that responds to that fire and it's lower to the ground, and it creates an opportunity for the wild turkeys love to nest in that area. And then once that mama bird, once that hen has hatched those babies, she's looking for areas that she can take them through where she can see, she can periscope up and see, and they can move through and bug. And so by burning that impenetrable jungle, you help create habitat that's beneficial for them.
So when we did the burn at my place, most of it was an open, I don't know, old hay ground or whatever. And then there was a little chunk of timber kind of in the middle of it. And we were just back up there, Scott and I, yesterday doing some work. And it was my first chance to kind of look at everything in the daylight because we finished, when we burned, it was dark by the time we got done. And what I noticed was like the leaves burned, the leaves had burned off the kind of the forest floor, but the stuff that sticks to you when you walk through, when you're shed hunting or something, all the stuff that'll stick you, all that stuff was still kind of there. And having not done one of these before, I didn't really know what to expect or anticipate. So is that pretty common where, it was such a slow burn through the timber because we didn't want to scar up any of the trees or anything like that. Like it was a real slow burn, but it took care of all the leaves, all that leaf matter or whatever, it created all that organic matter, but all the stuff that was about a foot or two off the ground still looked to be there. Yeah. Is that pretty common?
Yeah, it is, and you do want that slow fire. And what that fire also did was kill some of these little small sweet gum trees or ash trees or trees that you don't necessarily want, those little seedlings. It probably killed those. But it left kind of a skeleton or a frame of the vines that you're talking about, and those end up being places that these turkeys can run up underneath. These small turkeys can run up underneath and get away from avian predators. And so and we're not only talking about turkeys. We are also trying to do things to benefit wild quail. We may not hunt them, but we all want them around on our property.
Yeah.
And you don't see many of them anymore. So, the whole hashtag fire for feathers, it means a lot. It means primarily turkeys, but we do have an effort here to try to bring back the wild quail.
Interesting.
The other aspect is just sheer risk management. I think people in California are seeing, obviously they've had some drought conditions, but when you don't pay attention to the fuel load that's in a particular area and it just builds up over time, and you are actively working against the natural processes like lightning that used to roll through and burn an area naturally, then you're going to have an issue. And I think about that just around my house we got some pine trees that drop needles every year, and all that stuff is just tinder waiting to go up. And so you manage that in case there is a wildfire. Your property is not 100% protected, but it's less likely that it's going to burn catastrophically if you manage the fuel load that's out there.
That is true. So some place historically, in the deep South, some of the bird hunting plantations, when I growing up, there was one that I grew up around, and they burned every year religiously, and had been burning and it's so interesting to see that property and what it looks like after 15 years of religiously being burned, as opposed to one that has not been taken care of. It's just like one's a desert and one is just this lush ecosystem of all kind of native plants that is attractive to just all manner of wildlife, and it makes such a big difference. And now the thing that we have in our kind of our gamekeeper's toolbox, if you will, is not only we have fire, but there are a lot of different chemicals that we can use safely, I might add, that can burn back. So you could spray and kill some stuff and then come through with a fire. And where it used to take a number of years to make a property visibly look different, you can speed that process up with the aid of herbicides.
And your experience does, like, the part that was all kind of like a hay ground or whatever, it just was like clumped up grass, thick grass, but kind of laid over on itself. And that's what I really wanted to burn. I'm really, really anxious to see what it grows back into though this spring. In your experience, is it something like, I in my mind, I know it's not going to be this, but in my mind, I think about like when I go hunt at Dad's place and he's got all these warm season grasses and they burn all that stuff every year. And I'm talking, it's like 6 foot tall, it's just beautiful. Yeah. It looks like something out of a movie. Yeah. It's just really pretty stuff. And our access into all the spots, the deer blinds and all that, it's just fantastic because of it. And ultimately that's what I want to get to, but I know it's not something that, and I need to talk to him because I don't know if that the field I'm thinking about, if they planted the warm season grasses or if they're native grasses or what it is. In your experience, after something's been neglected for a long time and they do a prescribed burn, what does it come back like in that first year? I'm assuming like it's going to take several years of kind of doing this process.
Yeah, it will. And was it a fescue field?
I don't know what it was because the first time I looked at it was in January, so I don't know what it just looked like. It was hay ground to me. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's probably that grass is going to try to come back. So what you need to do is try to kind of identify what it is. And it may be through burning may work and take care of it. But once you know what it is, then it may be that you need to spray it with, like a glyphosate and in the summertime and try to get rid of some of that stuff and encourage the native stuff to come on and come back.
Gotcha.
And probably on your dad's place, Mark's place, some others. I know they plant a lot of those native grasses.
Yeah.
To encourage it to come back. So
yeah. Huh.
I discovered there's a term for if you do a managed burn on someone else's ground and they don't give you consent. It's called arson.
Yeah,
I've seen that on YouTube.
Whoops. Well, let's jump into some talk about clover, because I know that there's a lot of, like we're kind of nearing the end of the time where you can do frost seeding for clover, depending on where you are listening to the show at. But what do guys need to think about when they're looking at a piece of ground, like how much sunlight, drainage, pH, all that kind of good stuff if someone's thinking about putting in a clover plot? Yeah,
so clover is it's probably our favorite planting. I mean, it's just such a workhorse blend, and it needs to be figured in on your property in some capacity. Now, Matt, you got a new farm. Let's just say you got 10 plots on it. I'd try to have at least 3 or 4 of those plots be clover. Just go ahead and make them, if not more. But you also want to have some of those fall planted annuals like the deer radishes and the brassicas that are super attractive that you're going to hunt over. But those clover plots, they feed deer basically year round once you get them established, and it's just so important. Turkeys love the clover. But Tim, to answer your question, clover likes a good pH around 6 to 6.5.
Okay.
So a guy needs to do his soil test and try to figure out what he needs to add back. He may not need to add anything, or he may need to add quite a bit of lime, but it's going to perform better if you'll do your homework and do that right. Frost seeding is this time of year and maybe a few weeks behind us. Guys could walk out on the ground. It might even be a little snow there, but it occurs when the days warm up above freezing and the nights go back to freezing. So you're applying the seed, and as it warms up and thaws out, that seed kind of moves around and works its way into the soil, and then as it freezes, it heaves the soil back up. And so after a few freeze events like that, it kind of absorbs the seed into the soil. We don't get to do that in Mississippi. So I don't have a lot of experience doing it myself. We just hear about a lot of people that do it up north. But we have, in the South where we are, we plant our clover in the fall. And clover needs to sleep and then leap. It needs to get a root system established so that it can make it through a cold winter, like where you guys are, and up north, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Clover is planted in the spring of the year, so it's got all summer to establish its root system. Typically, when you see clover growing, it's got a heck of a root system underneath that plant, and so by the time it comes around to the fall of the year, when it gets super cold, it can't freeze out that clover because that root system is underground and established, and that lets it just come back and be a perennial. And we see it last 5, 6, 7, 8 years if it's managed. And managed meaning you might need to mow it a time or two, or you might need to spray and control some of the weeds that are naturally going to pop up in there. And that's not really all that hard to do. So the thing with clover is just a timing issue. In the deep south, we got to plant it in the fall, and when a fall, and I mean October, and then and where you guys are, and even further north, y'all have the luxury of being able to plant it in the spring of the year.
So that's, you and I had been chatting leading up to this about it, because I'm getting ready to plant some on this new piece. And so I have a couple questions about it. One, what's the difference between the BioLogic non-typical clover and the BioLogic Clover Plus? Because we frost-seeded with a lot of Clover Plus, but I know like Mark and Terry, like their preference is the non-typical clover.
Yeah, so it's two totally. They're both clovers. They're both. If you had to ask me to pick one, I'd have a hard time. It's like asking somebody that's like Matt. You got a couple of children. Which one do you like the best? It's hard to pick.
Boom.
No, I'm just messing.
Right. Maybe not. But so Clover Plus they're New Zealand. It's a blend of New Zealand red and white clovers, and then the plus component is chicory. And we've had that for 20 plus years in different ratios, but we really like it. It's really easy to grow, and wildlife loves it. But the non-typical clover is a white ladino that's got really large leaves, and it's just pure white ladino. And but it's a cultivar that we found. It was brought to us, and it's just amazing how it grows. And this is what your dad and Mark like about it. But it grows these large leaves. Most clover leaves you might think of as a relative analysis, we'll say like might be the size of a nickel to a quarter, the leaves. And we see the non-typical be like the size of a silver dollar. But it's also later in the spring, sometimes as much as 6 weeks before it really starts blooming. And when it starts blooming, that the plant is kind of changing its it's going to seed production. So it's more interested in producing seed than it is in forage or leaves. So because the non-typical is later in doing that, it's feeding your deer herd. Right, antler genesis is, y'all. I would imagine all the deer on your farm up there, they probably already shed.
Most of them.
Right now, we're seeing deer walking around with one antler, but those deer right now need some good nutrition. Your deer needs some good nutrition, right? So that clover is there. It's kind of kick-starting them, and in the coming months, as it starts warming up, it just starts flushing and producing a lot of forage. And it'll grow from the edge of the woods to the edge of the woods. It'll fill up a food plot, and it's just such nutritious, good quality, consistent food for them. It's just hard to beat it, and not to mention how boy, in the afternoons, your turkeys are going to be there.
Oh, yeah.
They love them.
So if you're trying to establish a new plot, okay, let me back up. If you're frost seeding, is there one that you prefer to frost seed with over the other?
No, not really. And the thing with frost seeding, you also have to be careful. You can get a head start and try to frost seed, and then come back later in the spring, and you might notice, well, I missed a spot over here, missed a spot over there, and you can fill those back in. So but I just wouldn't bet on the frost seeding. I would look at doing the frost seeding, but no, I was probably going to have to come back and supplement it and fill in the holes of it, because at the end of the day, you want it to look like a carpet all the way across it. Yeah. But I guess to go back to your question, either one will work fine being frost seeded.
Okay, so then fast forward, plant a new planting in the spring. So we're in the Midwest, or the upper Midwest, like you were talking about, and we're going to plant it in the spring. We were actually going to try to plant yet this week, but then the rain, it's just the ground was a little too muddy because I was going to try to capitalize off the fact that we just burned that ground, and I didn't want to have to spray any weeds or any new grasses or anything. So I thought, let's disc it up while it's just freshly burned, but it was just too wet for us to mess with that yet. But we wanted to go in there and get our clover planted, because last year we planted it a little bit too late. I forget, it was probably like, it was nearing the end of the planting season for it, so it might have been like late May or mid to late May. I know we were a little late and we struggled with it, but Terry had told us to use like a host crop like wheat. So we planted wheat to kind of shade it out to help it, I guess, really grow those roots through, or keep shaded out through the drought of the summer. So our plan is to go in and do the same kind of process and use wheat, plant the wheat, kind of drag it, and then go back over and plant the clover. But is there a certain time of year in the spring, like early spring versus late spring? Or are you wanting to try to give it a really good heads up before it starts getting super hot? Like, we're really worried about the mild temperatures we're having this year.
Yeah. It's going to be an early spring, for sure. So what your dad Terry is encouraging you to do is to use wheat, and we also use oats to do it, and that's kind of a nurse crop or a cover crop, and it takes some of the pressure off, because those deer are going to come out in that food plot, and when that clover's young and tender, that they're going to come nip it. But if you've got something else growing in there that can kind of distract them a little bit and help take some of the browse pressure off that clover while it establishes, that's a good thing to do. So, Matt, when we start seeing those, we've on plantbiologic.com, we've got a soil temperature guide. So you can go to our Plant Biologic, somewhere on there, I promise you, it'll say soil temperature. And it's updated every day. And when the nighttime temperature starts staying in the 50s and 60s, moving into the 60s, that's pretty indicative of your soil temperature. So the soil. So look at the nighttime temperatures. When it's staying in the upper 50s, I'd start trying to make my plan to get some seed laying on the ground.
Okay.
So we always talk about seed to soil contact and how important that is for germination. But I know clover is also a very tiny seed. So maybe talk about what's the right level of soil preparation. What is maybe too much that may end up burying the seed?
Yeah. Tim, it's a good point for people to understand. When you open up a bag of clover, the seeds they're so tiny. So it doesn't take much. Typically about 8 pounds will plant an acre, and we get actually, and I'm, in the seed business, but you can plant a larger area than an acre with 8 pounds. You can stretch it out a little bit. It's easier to do that than it is to plant a whole. It's better to do that than it is to plant an acre's worth of seed in a half acre. You don't want too many plants per square foot. But a good prepared seed bed, in other words, you might have gone over that thing, you might have disked it and broken up all the clods, and you've got a good, soft, fluffy seed bed, Tim, then oftentimes the best ones we'll run back over with a cultipacker and before we plant it. So you've kind of mashed out all the clods and it's flat and smooth, and then either walk over that thing or an ATV broadcaster and broadcast the seed, being careful not to put too much per square foot. We just put it on the smallest setting, so you might have to go over it twice so that you know that you hadn't put too. I mean, we've all opened it up really wide and put a bunch of seed out in one area and then realized what we've done. So you don't want to do that. So, but lay that seed on top, and if you're going to have a rain in the next couple of days, you might not even cover it back up. But if you've got a cultipacker handy, just run that cultipacker over it and get some, what you mentioned, seed to soil contact.
Yeah. And the specific scenario that I'm thinking about is a new kind of backwoods timber plot where I'm going to be lucky just to get an implement back there, let alone something to disc up the dirt. So I'm probably looking towards like what is the most I can do with the least amount of equipment to make something work for Clover.
Yeah. And sometimes, Tim, I mean, those can be fantastic hunting spots when you find those tucked away little plots. But if they've got to be able to get enough sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
You got to trim back some trees around the edge of it so you can get sunshine. And then leaf matter can be a problem too, because sometime in September, October, they're going to lay down and if they cover all that clover up and it's young and trying to grow. So I mean, I've gone in with a backpack blower and blown leaves before. If you I guess my point is, if you've got a small place like what you're talking about, you might have to baby that one along a little more than you would a more open, bigger, larger field
Sure.
that can kind of take care of itself.
So if you go in and you plant a cover crop with it, like oats or wheat, is there a certain point in the year then? Because I know when you plant a clover plot, like a spring plot, that first year, it may not be quite as lush as, say, the following year will be potentially, especially if you don't get the rain or anything like that. Is there a certain point in the year or the summer or in the fall when you would go in and brush hog or cut the cover crop part of it, so then the clover does get more sunlight? Or that was my question last year, and we ended up selling the property. I never got to really mess with it then. We planted it and didn't get to really see the results. But what do you do when it comes time for that?
Yeah, so what you have to, and this was hard for me to do because I like everything to be clean and neat and organized and gorgeous and look like a golf course. But in reality, what's better for wildlife is for it to be kind of ragged and maybe even have a few weeds in it. But the oats or the wheat will start shooting up and trying to make a seed head. Mm-hmm. And later in the summer, that seed head can be really valuable to your turkeys. And that mama hen will drag those babies in there, and they're grabbing insects out of the clover, or maybe even picking on the clover, but they'll strip those seed heads from that wheat or those oats. So it's beneficial for them. But at some point, yes, Matt, to answer your question, some point, maybe in September, you might run a bush hog across there and clean that out. And some folks, midsummer, might spray a grass-specific herbicide and knock that out.
Oh.
Because especially if they've got a lot of grassy weeds. Mm-hmm. So they use the nurse crop to get up and help it get established. But then before the grasses kind of take over, they might spray. There's several. You can go to a place where farmers buy chemicals. Helena's a great one, and buy grass specific that's labeled to be able to spray over legumes. And you could clean up the wheat, you could clean up the oats and any grassy weeds that might be in there.
All right.
So,
but I was mentioning, oftentimes you ride by a guy's place and it's you see some weeds or you see those wheat out there doing what we're describing, and it may not be as pretty as some food plots you see in a magazine or whatnot, but it's very beneficial for wildlife. Looking like that, that stage, that scenario is very good for wildlife. So it may not be as pleasing to the eye, but kind of have to move past that.
When you look at, to fast forward even further, and you kind of look at your fall plantings, and because of the lack of rain that we've been receiving in the late summer or early fall, we've really struggled to get things to grow once we've planted it. We've replanted it a couple times, and Mark and Terry, they'll replant 3-4 times, and it's not a battle that most guys can continue to keep up with. And so is clover kind of an answer? If you can get that clover plot established and it's rolling along, and like you said, there's a little bit more minimal maintenance, and say if it's staying warm, we're having these mild years. I mean, how long will deer will kind of stay on that all year, won't they?
Yeah, they will. And But Matt, to answer your question, I started off by saying what a workhorse clover is. In most years, under most normal conditions, it's just fantastic how it performs. But yeah, I mean, sometimes we get into these drought scenarios in July and August, and go for weeks without any rain, and that can be really rough on the clover plant. So they may actually kind of down in our part of the world where we are, Matt, ours just kind of go dormant in August, and it just kind of lays there waiting on September and October to get here, and some rain events come and a little bit cooler weather, and then it just flushes right back up.
That's what we've noticed too, and it's really resilient. We've had plots. You talked about how many years that they can go if they're managed properly. We had plots before I got a few key pieces of equipment. So before I had a good tank for a sprayer, before I had a pull behind brush hog for my side-by-side, before those things, and I was reliant on hiring someone to come in and do it and timing, we always struggled in our clover. It would end up looking rough before we got the right type of chemicals, from Mark and Wade and those guys. And it was looking a little rough. And I was to the point where I'm like, man, we need to replant this, these specific clover plots on one of my leases that I'm thinking about. And, Dad convinced me. He's like, no. He's like, go in and, do this, and this. And we had the equipment finally. He's like, try it. He goes, I think you'll be surprised how it bounces back. And it really has. And it continues to perform. And I'm thinking, like, it might be, at least 6 years that we've had these couple planted, and the one for sure, and they continue to look really, really good. And then I think about my fall plots, and it's hit or miss whether we get rain. When we get rain, we look like we know what we're doing. When we don't, when it's drought conditions and we replant, I just got a dirt patch. And so Terry, I know last year, because of fertilizer costs and because of the mild temperatures, and he started converting more and more into clover. And that's kind of my theory this year. What do I know? I'm just doing what I'm seeing done. And so that's kind of my theory this year. As much as I love planting like radishes or last bite, like when we can get it to grow, I love last bite. We have killed some deer and seen a bunch of deer and the tonnage that you get out of that. But when it doesn't grow and you don't have anything, and we've had like 2 really shitty deer seasons because of it, because I don't have the right food plots. And much of how we hunt is very reliant on that system. I'm thinking, man, maybe I need to go and plant more clover. So we frost seeded a ton of stuff in clover this year. We're planting more, on this new farm. I'm thinking about all clover. But if you would have asked me 3 years ago, I'd have said, no, I got to have some radishes, or I got to have last bite for the early season. But I just have trouble getting everything to grow.
Yeah. So, Matt, I've known you a long time. And if you think back in your mind, let's go back 20 years. It just seems like the last couple of years are the ones that were really bad. There's been more good than there's been bad.
Yeah.
But it does happen. And I think you're on a plan that makes a lot of sense to try to have a little more clover. But, you could also, in an existing clover field, when the last part of August starts rolling around and you're going to the baseball games and all that, and you see it's going to rain, you could get ahead of that rain with some radish and put a half rate of deer radish or a half rate of our winter bulbs or something like that. You could overseed that into a clover plot.
Oh.
And, it'll come up and be there for this fall.
So you're just broadcasting it. You don't need to disc it in or anything.
No. You wouldn't disc it. You would just walk across it with your hand seeder or with a 4-wheeler, and just so you don't get in it with a tractor, but just overseed some radishes into that clover, and you can get those going. If you know it's going to rain, you can do that and add to the clover for the fall.
That's interesting because that's the dilemma, right? Like I'm thinking in my mind, I gotta disc it up, I gotta prepare the seed bed, and if you're taking away a food source that is established to add another one in the hopes that it's going to rain, a lot of times what we see is like August, you'll get a decent rain in early August. This is what's been happening, and then it shuts off all the way through October.
Not so much.
Yeah. So that's interesting. That may be something we have to try. So a half rate, and you just overseeded on top of your clover.
Yeah, I mean, we do that. People do that, and it just helps you grow a more tonnage of forage, a more fall attractive forage than what just clover alone is. Clover alone is great, but if you start adding some radishes to it in November and December, you will be glad you did. Well,
and really like September and October, we have had that green, those first couple phases. When they've grown, radishes, the deer maul them. Like they can't. It's such an attractant for them. It's crazy. At least kind of in this area, I know. Yeah. So don't give up on trying to grow some fall planted plots. And by fall, you guys plant in late August usually.
You get started, and that's kind of still summer, so I don't want to confuse anybody listening, but August is a good month to get ready. And if you can see some rain in late August coming, try to get in front of it. But I guess what I want you to remember though, Matt, I think there's been more good years than there's been bad years. So next year, be open-minded, be hopeful, because next year could be the year.
Bobby, I had 2 pretty bad seasons back to back.
That is kind of the nature of being a hunter, though. We're eternal optimists. Otherwise, we would just quit because most times nothing's happening.
I'm very optimistic that it can't get much worse.
Well, you guys want to hop into our real wild clip?
Sure. Bobby, you got time to stick with us for a few more minutes?
Yeah, I can.
All right.
Okay. Well, this is an up-close encounter.
All right. So we got a real wild clip this week. It's brought to you by Silencer Central. Look at us. We have sponsors.
Whoa.
All right, Bobby. So each week we show a clip. Here we have a bobcat, right?
Yeah, it's coming in close, too. So it looks like a guy's in a ground blind, maybe. And this bobcat's working its way across some down trees and through a root wad. And he's coming to check out what's going on.
I thought I've seen an extended clip of this where it gets even closer. Maybe not. Maybe this is the clip.
The guy gets mauled by it.
Well, he turns it off when it looks like it's about 10 yards away.
Because every now and again you do see footage of someone getting attacked by a bobcat. So I'd rather have my fists up as opposed to have my phone there in my face.
Well, if he's hunting, I'd rather have a weapon up. Yeah. I know you can't just shoot. You gotta have the right things in the right states.
Yes.
But sometimes you can defend yourself.
Hand-to-hand combat with a bobcat, I think, is legal in all 50 states. So I think you're good. That's weird. You just never know what you're going to see when you sit still.
We've had a lot of bobcat footage lately that I've seen coming across. The beauty of everybody having a cell phone is that now that we were getting all these wild clips coming in. But, you're seeing more bobcats. I can count on one hand the amount of bobcats I've seen in the wild.
The bourbon farm is probably better for bobcats and coyotes than it is for whitetails. So I've actually seen
maybe that's why
quite a few. Yeah, it certainly doesn't help. But it's also the argument against Bigfoot because people are like, everyone's got a high def camera on them. We would have seen them by now if Bigfoot's out there. Bobby, where do you stand on the Bigfoot question?
Yeah, I wish I would like to think that he's out there somewhere. How exciting would that be to think that there's, an animal like that? But I'm like you, with all the cameras that are out there, somebody would have a picture.
Look, I think about Harry and the Hendersons, and I think it's real.
Great callback.
John Lithgow, great movie.
It's legit.
Him and Harry had some real back-to-back fights, but man, Harry, he became a beloved member of the family.
Member of the family, yeah.
I'm sure you're a huge John Lithgow fan, right, Bobby?
You know what? I don't know that I've seen Harry and the Hendersons, to be honest.
Dude, come on, get a grip on life. Go back to Netflix and pull that one up. It's a classic.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
Ask Jessie. I guarantee you Jessie's seen Harry and the Hendersons.
I will ask her for sure.
All right.
still remember the trailer for that. They're driving in their station wagon. Because we had a station wagon that was like that, like the wood panel on the side.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we were rolling.
The Lurks had, like Jared, Justin, their family, they had one, and we all lived right near each other. And so I remember riding in the back of that thing.
Yeah.
You really thought you were doing
awesome.
something. You got to ride in the back. Like you weren't calling the front seat. You're calling the back seat. We're looking backwards, terrorizing the people in the car behind you.
Well, and we're from the generation, Bobby, you too, where riding in the pickup truck bed to a neighboring town was an acceptable form of transportation.
Now I see it on the interstate in St. Louis. I think, oh my God, this guy's hit rock bottom. Can't get in the front seat.
What happened there?
Yeah.
All right. Well, so that I'm not sure who that clip came from, but thank you to whatever DeerCaster sent that in. That's cool.
All right. Question of the day. So the question of the day is probably presented by Victory Archery. I love that you just finally just inserted and left the word probably instead of probably. Presented by Victory Archery, the carbon arrow experts. And this week it's coming from James.
Hey guys, my question is in regards to the avian flu. How concerned should we be as hunters about the effect of avian flu on game birds and specifically for the wild turkey? My farms are in an area with many large poultry operations, many of which were affected greatly by avian flu outbreaks in spring 2022. In my opinion, the remediation method of large outdoor compost piles containing birds and waste from contaminated barns seems to allow for potential contact with wild bird populations. I do feel like wild turkey sightings in this area have declined. Just curious what your thoughts are. Thanks.
I mean, this guy's asking a question that's next level for our audience. Like, where did James come from? He can't be one of our listeners.
I think his mom. There's something about the term remediation pile that does not sound good at all.
But you don't say that.
Pile of dead birds and broken eggs and feces and.
Hold on.
You and your mom are hillbillies.
So, Bobby, do you have any knowledge on the avian bird flu and how it affects the turkey population?
Yeah. We did a podcast back probably around Christmas with a Ducks Unlimited biologist about, we were hearing so many accounts of snow geese and ducks being found around the edge of lakes and stuff that were, there'd be dead ducks and then there'd be other ducks that wouldn't fly off. And it was just very concerning. And there's been a major outbreak of the avian flu this year, and we've heard it in the waterfowl world. We've heard it that buzzards are getting it as they eat the dead carcasses of the ducks and whatnot. Millions of chickens. But I called and talked to Dr. Michael Chamberlain about, and I said, hey, is this something that we need to worry about with turkeys and be aware of? And I just wanted to kind of get his insight, and he was aware of a few instances where turkeys had been sent to their lab and it tested positive for the avian flu, but only a handful of instances. And so he was quick to point out that yes, they can catch it, but he had not heard of and this was back again around Christmas, but he had not heard of it affecting a lot of or being reported and tested positively for in a lot of turkeys. So I don't know that helped you. They can definitely get it, and it's something that we need to be mindful of and watchful of. And I'm not sure that there's a lot we can do. It's just one of these things that kind of rolls through nature.
Yeah. Well, you know more than we know. So
yeah,
I'm glad we asked you that.
The problem with diseases that are related, that are in the same family, are that they much more easily jump from subspecies. It's different if you got like a mammal versus a bird. A mammal has a lot less to worry about from the avian flu because it just works differently. But bird to bird is a totally different ballgame. It's much easier to make that jump.
Like zombies.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, Bobby, when you were saying that, I couldn't help but think in Dr. Chamberlain's office, a turkey calling to make an appointment to be seen for a flu, and him just like, come on in, get him tested. Okay, you're on your way out. Swab your nasal cavity.
That man, he is very knowledgeable, isn't he? He's a joy to listen to in the turkey field.
Yeah, he really is. We've done a lot with him. We think a lot of him, and we're just trying to help be the wind underneath his wings, if you allow me to use
you just make
an
that up?
expression like that here. But to help him do more research, because I even think in Missouri, y'all's turkey numbers are down.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Places. So
Yeah.
and we think it's just kind of a death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, there's not one thing you can point to, but we want to make sure we try to figure it out and try to help.
Yeah, we have a upcoming series. I think the next podcast after this one airs, we have
Ray.
our friend Ray I on, and then after Ray, we start a series. We call it the Longbeard Legends, and there's 5 different episodes and interviews with different guests. And I know we have Ron Jolly from Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm sure this topic's going to come up with Will Primos and Chris Kirby, Ernie Calandrelli. I'm trying to think Cuz Strickland. Yeah, so we have some really great guests coming up, and look forward to kind of diving into all these topics. But we've had Dr. Chamberlain on the podcast before, probably maybe over a year.
Yeah, it's been about a year now.
So we might link up to the show notes there. But yeah, he's great.
And this,
You mentioned all those legends, and those are all some fantastic names. But Mark,
We can't get him.
he is so. I mean, just right at your fingertips, you may have.
You would think that. Well, he's too busy. He's doing that working class OG series. So
they have a podcast now.
that's what I hear.
Neat.
Yeah, we obviously anytime we can, we love to have Mark on, and he's helped us out with a couple of these guests, and of course Terry, the stories that they can tell from those early days and the King of the Spring days and Toxie and staying down there and hunting with you guys down there. Those are some of the best stories.
Listeners seem to enjoy it too.
Yeah, anything's better than us.
Right. So the wildlife word this week is brought to you by Loophole Optics, proudly American and rugged to the core. Count on top quality glass to see those toms this season before they see you. Okay, we're talking about hens and their nests. So what happens if a hen loses her initial clutch of eggs in the spring? It's multiple choice. Does she A, do nothing and she just sulks the rest of the spring? B, mates again and lays a new clutch? C, she lays a new clutch without mating again? Wow. D, she goes and kills the dirty SOB that killed her babies.
Bobby, what do you think? It's a tough one.
It's the answer will probably kind of surprise you, but they've got this ability to have a. Do you want me to give the answer? Or
Yeah,
do you want me to-
yeah.
Yeah, so I think the answer is that she'll lay another clutch, but she doesn't have to breed again. More than likely, she's got a reservoir that can hang on to. I guess I can say sperm on your podcast.
You just did.
But,
That's what she said.
She may have to indeed breed again, depending on how long it's been. But it's really amazing how that works with them.
Sounds like there's 2 answers.
Wow.
So what is it?
Matt, are you going to...
I was gonna go with B. She mates again, but now I'm gonna go with B and C.
Because Bobby laid out such a compelling case, and Bobby is right that the male turkey sperm can last for up to 30 days.
Nice.
So she can lay a new clutch without
sorry.
mating. Are you sorry?
I'm looking at Alan, and
Oh, it's
he's
Alan.
laughing.
Alan's the problem.
I'm a child.
Bobby, you were trying to be so artful about it. I really appreciate it. Someone who appreciates words, I
Look,
can tell you.
You're not on the Gamekeeper podcast. You're on the 100% Wild podcast. It's a little more lowbrow over here. Which one of our listeners I think I told you about this, Bobby. A guy left us a review at Talk somewhere, and he talked about how he didn't really care for our podcast because of the lowbrow nature of it, but he really enjoyed the Gamekeeper podcast.
Because him and his grandson could listen.
Yeah.
Yep.
I get it.
Yeah, I don't understand. That's just you're making me laugh. I don't know.
You're the Jedi, we're the Sith.
That's
What can I
the
say?
whole point, making you laugh. And the audience.
And then you asked on Apple, gave us 5 stars. He said, some guy in a saddle said he'd give me a hat if I dropped 5 stars. Give up the good work, gentlemen. Truly enjoy the show. Thank you.
Yeah, but
you asked.
how do we know who he asked or who he is?
Who
We
knows?
can't give him a hat if we don't know who he is.
Well, that's what he gets for listening to someone in a saddle.
Loser.
It's your own fault, you
Thanks
ass.
for the 5 stars.
Thanks.
By the
You
way.
idiot.
Y'all had reviewers try to trick y'all with like funny names to get you to read like I mean, we've had some guys leave.
I'm sure we will now.
Well,
Yeah, that were like like bend over. Or that's a mild one. But
So,
Do you read your reviews on air? I would love that, to hear you read somebody's review of Bend Over.
there was one, and it was douche lips. but we didn't realize it was douche. We read it as douche lips. Nobody caught it until we said,
Dude, you're like living our life here.
man, well, Bobby, the thing is we do it to ourselves. That's the whole premise of this next segment, is that we do it to ourselves because it's funny.
Okay.
But you don't say that.
All right. So the last thing, and then Bobby, I know you're running late. We got to let you go. So the last thing we got, every week, we have this private Facebook group called the Rack Pack. It's for the listeners of the show, fans of the show, and just kind of like-minded people. And so if you go to Facebook and type in Drury Outdoors Rack Pack or 100% Wild Rack Pack, this will come up and you can join it. And so every week, Tim lists out a bunch of names of new members in the Rack Pack. And every week, I screw them up as I read them. And there's always one fake name, kind of based on like the premise that you just talked about. It's like the old Bart Simpson calling Moe's Tavern, and getting Moe to, ask, hey, is Bend Over in the bar? It's Bend Over in the bar. So anyhow, here's the names this week. We got Dustin Hukin?
Definitely made up.
Okay, Josh Mulhauser, old Molesy.
Muehlhauser.
Brad Robertson, Michael Getz, Corey Penberthy, sounds very fancy. Jake Waddle. Is that a turkey-related fake name? Or Mike Inman.
Ooh.
I would have thought maybe Mike Inman was the fake name, but there's like a local company called like Inman Heating and Cooling or Inman
yeah,
Air.
it's true,
So
yeah.
it's got commercials all over. So
Yeah.
he's real. I don't know which one's fake. Corey Penberthy? No.
I don't know. Michael Gates sounds fake to me.
Michael Gates.
Could be Jake Waddle.
Jake Waddle. Jake. Oh, dang it. That's so obvious. Bobby, don't laugh. Well,
He's laughing with us.
it's been a
not
while
at
since
us.
we've had you on, and I'm sure it'll be a while till you come back on. Schedule's probably going to fill up, but I'd love to have you on more often.
Yes.
yeah, we should do that.
sister
I wish you
podcast.
guys.
We got too many funny stories that behind the scenes stories over the years. Bobby was a long time judge, like American Idol style for
Simon Cowell.
Yeah. He on Dream Season, but before that he was BioLogic over on Wildlife
BioLogic.
Obsession. So a lot of TV talk we can go through.
Yeah, those are fun days. I miss that, Matt.
Same.
Well, folks, if you're not subscribed to the Gamekeeper podcast, go do that. You will not be disappointed. And Jeff Foxworthy intros their show, which is not bad. Pretty cool.
Bobby, where can people find what they need to know about BioLogic, about being a gamekeeper, the magazine, any of that stuff?
Yeah, it's probably just the easiest thing is to go to mossyoak.com, and then you'll see a header across there, and you can click on Gamekeepers, or you can click on BioLogic or Native or whatever you want to learn about. So it's all right there.
These guys have really carved out that space and became the industry experts, or having industry experts in to kind of help, I think, that cause. They're championing it, and whether it's improving your property or learning more about the wild game or whatever it is, these guys are top of the list. So
know
check
their
it out.
stuff. Yep.
I appreciate y'all letting me be on, and we love you guys and what y'all do. We have the utmost respect for Drury Outdoors. It's you guys are the pinnacle. You set the bar for the hunting standard, and that it's amazing what you guys have done through the years. But thank you for letting us be represented by you guys.
Thank you, Bobby. And by you guys, just to clarify, he means Mark and Terry, not Tim and Matt. All right, Bobby. Thank you, man. We appreciate
See
you.
ya.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, guys. Until next time, peace out.
Adios.
DeerCast is now supercharged with maps. Get ahead of your game with killer new features like live Doppler radar, wind check out to 5 days, virtual rain gauges, GPS path tracking, and more. Plus, get our 14-day revolutionary DeerCast prediction and access to DeerCast Track. Prep, predict, and pursue with DeerCast.
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV was brought to you by Leupold.